The fatal flaw of side proposition is that they miss the key clash in today's debate. This debate is not about regretting social norms that pressure people into getting a relationship. What this debate is about is whether or not we support the decision of young people to remain single. Therefore, we on side opposition do not have to defend sexist norms and societal pressure that forces women into entering toxic relationships. The important clash in today's debate is this. Proposition prefers a world where younger people choose to remain single. We on opposition prefer a world where they choose to get into a relationship and keep their options open. We don't have to defend pressuring people into a relationship. That isn't the debate. Our stance, therefore, is that we do not support the decision of young people to remain single. What we do support is young people remaining open to having a relationship. This can range from dating into entering into a legal marriage. This also opens up choices, such as adopting or conceiving a child together. Note that this is not a policy debate, but rather a debate about the world we prefer to live in. Hence, it is not about forcing or pressuring youth into entering a relationship. Rather, it is about preferring a world where youths are open to the possibility of being in a relationship. This debate is also most contextual in developed nations, because in developing nations with more conservative views, it is already the dominant social narrative to get married and have children. It is precisely in more liberal developed nations where the desire to remain single is a plausible, acceptable choice in the first place for the debate to even occur. But before I move on to responses to their arguments, recognize that their arguments are contradictory. Because on one hand, they say that a relationship is very bad because it pressures women into the patriarchy. But recognize that at the very top of first proposition, they say that they are okay for affirming a so-called loving relationship. So on their side, they have to give us a viable reason as to why young women will be able to differentiate between what a loving relationship is, as they so claim, and a toxic relationship that they want to push on our side. But recognize that I've already told you it's not our burden on our side. Two responses to their arguments. First, on harming women, and second, on entering into a relationship young. So first, on changing perceptions about the role of women. We completely agree with all the historical injustices that have been enacted on women, and we are sympathetic to that on side opposition. But we say that we do not have to support what proposition is pushing on us. We do not have to support the continued pressure of the patriarchy. We don't have to pressure young women into staying in a relationship that is not what we stand for. If anything, it's on our side about keeping options open that allows women to enter relationships that are healthy and not toxic. Because recognize that on their side, when women choose to enter a relationship older, there are fewer potential partners, and the short time period and pressure into getting a relationship because you're older in the future means you're more likely to pressure women into entering bad relationships because they're forced to make it in a short time period and there's less people to choose from. Therefore, they need to clarify their stance in second proposition. Do they want young people to remain single in the interim or in the long term? My argument will prove how, regardless, they will have to be forced to remain single in the long term. Second argument from their side about entering a relationship young. And this is a very oversimplified narrative that first proposition paints to us. Because a relationship merely isn't about spending a lot of money on going out for dates, for example. There are economic benefits to having a partner to share with. I'll explain that in my first argument. So first argument, on how not disavowing relationships is crucial for an individual. The thesis of this argument is that keeping one's options open allows individuals to better their opportunities to life and their interactions with others. Premise. The moment a young person chooses not to enter a relationship, that individual is likely to be consigned to that decision in the long term, if not forever, even if they choose to retract their decision, two structural reasons. First, because in the short term, the decision made to remain single probably means that you begin to lose what is important for finding a partner. You invest all your time in a career as a substitute for romantic fulfillment, you pour all your time into your work, and you take on excessive work commitments, for example. In the worst case, this is exactly what we see in Japan, where many young men retreat from society to live as recluses, playing video games in their parents' houses instead. As time goes on, these people lose even the most simple ability to interact with other people, and that makes it much harder for them to find potential partners in the future. No thank you. The second reason is because you can't get off a hedonistic treadmill. What this means is that you'll never become satisfied with what you're doing because you keep on digging your grave deeper and deeper in finding fulfillment in your work when you may have found it in your romantic fulfillment, for example. This means that you never ever end up satisfied with the work commitment that you've chosen in your life. The last reason is because when you have publicly declared your intention to remain single to your friends, it is very difficult on your own ego to retract that decision in your future, because that's the way that human pride works. When you proudly announce that this is a principled decision that you're going to take when you're single, it is very hard for you to retract that in the future. This is problematic because it's a terribly misinformed choice that proposition is pressuring people into, especially since perspectives grow and evolve in the future and people are likely to change their minds as they grow. But it is also beneficial to enter a relationship, which is why people are likely to regret and change their minds in the future. First, it is important to form emotional connections, especially as you grow older. When you want to share closely intimate connections, for example, when you miss a potential partner to thank you, caring for you when you're sick, or when you want a partner to stick with you through thin and thin or the downturns in your life. But the second reason is because marriage, or even just having a partner, really helps in the day-to-day runnings of your life. Being able to share your income, for example, or having your rent or your monthly college tuition fee paid for by your boyfriend this month because you're in a money crunch, for example. Or merely being able to access state subsidies for couples that singles cannot access, like priority to public housing, for example. You cannot get all this when you're forced to remain single and therefore consigned to that choice in the future, because you suddenly realize that now you have no ability to find a partner when you're 40 or 50 and all your friends are gone and married. Fundamentally, we agree that the benefits of some other relationships may overlap, but as social creatures, the added emotional and physical benefit of an intimate relationship further enriches you as an individual. You cannot harm your future self by consigning yourself to one fixed choice and never being able to change that. Before I move on to my second argument, yes?
Would you not agree friendships are a form of intimate connection that are just as valid as relationships?
Yes, thank you, but I have two responses to that. First, friends are not as close as emotional ties with a romantic relationship. For instance, you may be afraid that your friend judges you, but you're more likely to be open with your romantic partner. Second, there's a lot of things that you can do with a romantic partner that you cannot do with a friend. For example, you can't demand that your friend, pay your rent for you, because that is something that requires a far more intimate level of connection. Second argument on how not having individuals consign themselves to a fixed choice is beneficial to society. And the thesis of this argument is that we think youth should not choose to remain single because more couples is beneficial to society and to individuals in the long run. Society currently is experiencing a huge problem of aging populations. And as I said earlier in my setup, this is most relevant in developed nations, as stated earlier, where the working adults to dependency ratio is becoming as bad as 1 to 10 in places like Taiwan and Japan, for example. Why is this problematic? First, because state welfare programs are stretched far more thin on site proposition when there's so many elderly and less contributing workforce to the sort of tax revenue that governments have to care for all these individuals. The second is because it harms the individual when they are squeezed more by the state and have to pay more taxes to support a huge and growing dependency base on proposition. On our side, we solve this. First, because when there are more couples, you're just more likely to have more numerical children on site opposition as compared to site proposition. That's when you have a larger workforce, you have more contributing members of society, those who are paying taxes, those who are providing services. That is when you have better welfare programs. Second, when you have a partner to share the tax responsibility with, that is when your burden is lightened, and on our side, individuals feel less of a pinch. We believe that relationships are meaningful connections and commitments we are proud to oppose.
Thank you. Is the second speaker of proposition is ready? We can continue.
To truly love someone, you need to love yourself first. That is what we're proposing on our proposition. You must become independent to know yourself in order to have a more healthy and stable relationship in the future We have clearly said this. We support relationships in the future. We just say it's better to be. We just say that we support relationships being people being single right now. What am I going to do in my speech? I'm going to present points of repair to our side of the house, points of rebuttal on their side of the house, and also talk about some misframing they've done, and also talk about the third argument of side opposite proposition. When later in life you're going to have a happier relationship if you are single now. We still support this. Now on to the reparation towards our side of the house. They stated to us that we are contradicting ourselves by they said they misframed our case as saying we contradicted ourselves. We said relationships are okay. We never said relationships are bad. We said pressure to be in a relationship is bad. We clearly stated that the love in a relationship is when you are, for example, not being in a sex relationship or not being pressured to do certain things. In the end, we see that they have misframed our case on this side. And
Enough information.
no, thank you. Additionally, they said that we as opposition don't need to defend sexist norms like we said. They kind of actually have to do this. It teaches them, they have to support the cycle of dependence and learning in a relationship. They said that they get to understand and later in life have a more stable relationship. Therefore, they must include every form of relationship in their argumentation. If they disclude forms of relationship, then they are going against their burden. In the end, we see that they have to include it. No, thank you. Have to include it as it's to prove their arguments. If they don't do this, they seem to fail in that. Therefore, we also win this side. No, thank you. And then on to the argument on their side of the house as a rebuttal. They said that, where is it? Yes. They said that keeping one's options open is a beneficial thing. They said they're going to be consigned to singleness in the end, and therefore they have to keep their opportunities open. And they said young people retreat from society, for example, go to their basement and play video games and don't get to be happy with their family in the future. This is not quite the case. People get fulfillment in many other aspects in life. They can get fulfillment in interests of their university. I can get fulfillment in doing law studies, for example. Other people can do it for being in a relationship. That is totally fine. We accept on our side of the house. They seem to misframe this on their side of the house. Additionally, we see that the interest can take over a relationship. They seem to disagree, and they seem to ignore that we take interest over relationships in many cases. Before I continue, you seem to disagree.
If I see my peers in a loving relationship, surely that is a form of societal pressure because I see fulfillment that my friends have that I cannot find myself. So why is it on your side that these pressures supposedly don't exist?
On our side of the house, we are talking about why the pressures that do exist need to be broken. We have talked about that, and we have seen why these pressures are a bad thing. Therefore, we say, the moment we support people being single, these pressures are going to back out. It's been happening with many other circumstances. For example, the Black Lives Matter movement. Racism has been going back as people support these certain groups of people. Therefore, we see that societal pressure is going to is the bad thing on our side of the house, or on your side of the house. Therefore, we need to solve that as soon as possible. With that, I am now going to move on to the third argument, why there will be happier relationships in future life. We see in the status quo, people are pressured to get into a relationship and settle in earlier due to the societal pressures. And therefore, with our side, they get to learn independently and have a happier relationship. So what are the negative effects of an early relationship? No, thank you. First one is that they're unsure if they actually like their partner. When you're young, you still haven't fully learned yourself. You still haven't fully gone to develop yourself and understand what you truly like. You still need to socially develop by being independent and trying out new things on yourself and seeing what actually fits you. Therefore, not fully knowing yourself, not fully knowing yourself yet means you do not know exactly who you are compatible for. You don't understand, you do not know who you're fully compatible for. At this point, it's just hormones for why you like someone. Second negative impact is why you can't become independent. Young teens and adults need to become independent at this stage of their life. Being with someone at an early age will stop them from doing this. Why is this? Two reasons. You have to rely on them to do many things for you. There are cases where one person in a relationship takes over and does most of the work in the place. In the end, this means the other person is left to do this. In many other cases, you don't get to be alone. You don't get to be alone. You get to be in close quarters at all times, and because of this, you're not able to learn. Because when you're alone, you're forced to learn things on the basis of trying to solve the problems of basic life. This forces you to act on the problems alone and become independent in the essential and early stage in life. Third bad thing is that you're more likely to be unhappy in the relationship. Having feelings of doubt and possibly having completely different lives and personalities, this can lead to a toxic relationship. This is what we see. A lot of disagreement occurs with different opinions. This is, for example, if you want to go to a restaurant, for example. One person wants Mexican food, other one wants Asian food. We see this happening quite a lot. This can escalate on and on to get to a toxic relationship. Another reason is you're not going to be able to do what you like as an individual, and this leads to a separation and a heartbreak in the end. So why are relationships in the future much better? First reason, you get to learn and love yourself. You develop independently and truly get to understand what you like by delving deep in your interests. Later, you get to narrow down your choice for a relationship based on this experience of being independent and learning who you are. Second advantage is you get to love your partner more when you become more independent. Knowing what you like, you can fit with someone of your interests. You get to connect on a deeper level as you spend more time together doing the things you actually like. You get to talk more about things you like, therefore understand your partner in a deeper level. That is what changes on our side of the house, from toxic to a loving relationship as we support single lives during the young stage of people. Later in life, we say that you can be in a relationship. So, what are the bad impacts we see? There is a bad coping mechanism when you're in a toxic relationship and you break up. These certain things include, for example, taking drugs or drinking. These things can directly harm your body and your mind and later mess you up in life. Additionally, you're more likely to accept abusive relationships. This is because when you're really young, you're easily able to be manipulated. You can be groomed to feel as if it is right to be in a violent relationship. So what are the good impacts here? We support young people growing independently and loving themselves, and to be capable of loving others without the risk of falling into the harms we see on side opposition. Because of this, we urge you to vote side proposition. Thank you.
If the second speaker opposition is ready, we can continue.
In this speech, before I move on, I want to make three things clear. First, opposition does not have to say that every single time someone confesses to you, you therefore have to enter a relationship. It is side proposition that has the hard burden of this debate in explaining why you should make the active choice to never enter a relationship. The impact of this on the rest of their case is that it does not mean that individuals enter into every single coercive relationship. You have to see whether or not you're compatible with that individual in the first place. The second clarification I'd like to make is on their argument about feminism. Matthew asks you a very important question. Why exactly is it that if you believe that feminist, patriarchal structures exist in every single relationship, as they say, because it's so incredibly entrenched, why are you still okay with loving relationships? The reason why this contradiction is so incredibly dangerous is because they concede that there are some relationships out there that actually matter to individuals and can be beneficial. Why is this important? Because Matthew gives you good analogy
analysis as to why once you shut off all other options, you're unable to access this kind of happiness, the kind of happiness that comes in a relationship. They didn't give a substantive response to that claim. I want to talk about 3 things in this speech. First, on compulsion. Second, on how individuals get happy lives. And lastly, on society, the clash they did not engage with in first opposition. So first, on compulsion. The core of the argument of the proposition is that individuals feel compelled to enter into every single relationship because they feel like they're not going to enter into any ones that are better. Let's ask ourselves a very basic question. Who are the kinds of individuals that will probably make the choice to not enter a relationship? We would suggest that in the vast majority of these cases, as they said, these are probably individuals who do in fact value their independence. They do in fact value and have dreams and aspirations of their own based on the characterization that they said. The problem here is that such an individual is probably likely to choose a partner in terms of someone that's likely to support them in the long run. So for example, if you want to go to college, you're more likely, for example, to go to date someone who actually supports your dreams of going to college. If you are the kind of person that wants to make these decisions, you're more likely to make a decision to enter yourself into a loving relationship. You're more likely to find a relationship that suits you in the first place. There exists a myriad of possibilities that they don't talk about. Furthermore, Matthew gives you substantive reasons as to why these individuals will be able to help you in these endeavors. So a good example of this would be someone paying for your college fees and tuition, for example. Someone supporting you every single time you get discouraged in your relationship or whatever you're trying to do in the real world. The burden is therefore on proposition to prove that a blanket decision has to be made. Furthermore, the next argument they make is one in second speaker. They say, but young relationships are better. A couple of responses here. The first is, you can actually leave a relationship. Second of all, and more importantly, I think actually being in a relationship early in life might be pretty beneficial. The reason is because the only way that you can know what a good relationship looks like is to actually have been in a relationship before, to look for red flags in terms of what you like and dislike within a relationship. It's a bit strange, therefore, for such proposition to say that you'll suddenly be able to know what you as an individual like the moment that you leave this kind of relationship. So let's be very clear here. In the world of the proposition, they shut off a lot of other alternatives, and that is something that's not good for them. The second thing I want to discuss here is then how exactly do individuals find and build meaningful lives. The first thing I want to talk about here is process should always prioritize and be prioritized over outcomes. What exactly will people try to find meaning in their side of the house? We live in a world of capitalism. The capitalistic structure often means that people try to find meaning in things like work, for example, in terms of things like flaunting their wealth, for example, because that is what the world around us tells us is good and important. Why is this bad? Matthew gives you 2 reasons that were not responded to. The first is the hedonistic treadmill. Individuals are almost never satisfied with what they're able to do. A good example of this would be if you want to advance at a certain point in your career, once you get that career progression, you become used to that and feel a bit empty inside. Second, and more importantly, I'm not sure whether or not everyone will be able to enter into a kind of situation where someone is going to be able to get them to that point. So what I mean by this is not everyone will be able to invent something new in this world. I think it's important to recognize that there are many things that they don't deal with. The next thing they say is relationships are time-consuming. Yes, but we suggest to you on the side of the opposition, even if they're time-consuming, they are worth it. The reason is because of the emotional support that you're able to get from these individuals. The fact that you're able, for example, to get discouraged. The fact that you're able to talk to this person at the end of the day. The fact that this person is able to help you and give you advice in ways that are unique. Their question then is, but what about friends? I have a couple of responses to this. The first response is, friends are different in the sense that they don't feel necessarily obligated to you. A friendship is not a mutually exclusive relationship that you have with an individual in a relationship. It's a very different kind of relationship that you have. You don't always need to help out your friends in that unique way all the time. A relationship is an express commitment to an individual. The idea that this person's identity and needs are subsumed into who you are as an individual. And I think that means that you're more likely to get more help, more companionship. You're more likely to talk to them about deep emotional insecurities that you have that you don't necessarily want to talk about with your friend. So let's be very clear here. When you shut out these choices, Matthew gives you reasons why you won't be able to access any of these things. And I think that is fundamentally harmful. Last thing I want to discuss here on benefits to society. They completely drop this argument. I want to make 2 points here. The first is, Matthew explains why in many parts of the world there are not enough children being made, and that means that the dependency ratio is horrible. That means that tax structures are often inverted. That means that it's very hard for us to allow anyone else to live sustainably. The second problem here is the nuclear family in general. We think that having specialized parents to look after a specific set of children because they love that individual is on the whole good thing, because that means that the child gets more love, the child gets more attention to their unique idiosyncrasies that means that we think that the nuclear family ought to be preserved. So the end of all of these contentions, I want to prove to something very simple. Their side shuts off all alternatives. Individuals can choose to have a good relationship that they need, and their side must prove to us why you should never enter a relationship ever at all. I'm now going to move on to my team's third and final argument about why this leads to a rise in abusive relationships. Here, I'm going to clash directly with everything they said, explain to you why it gets worse off. First thing I'd like to point out, the shutting off of options leads to an increase in abusive relationships. Because at the point in which an individual chooses not to be a relationship, this means that they might inevitably end up changing their mind in the long run. Because as they said, the narrative is so incredibly horrible and pervasive. So what does this mean? This leads to a number of outcomes. First, often that means that when you're old, people might not want to date you because your personality is formed. You might have other people, for example, might have children with you. People often just don't want to date individuals while it's in middle age. The problem with this is that you become desperate. You start jamming pieces which don't necessarily work. You try to make something work, but you feel that if you leave a relationship, you'll never be able to get a better one. The second thing here, and important here, is that individuals choose, therefore, to stay in abusive relationships. Because of the fact that, as Matthew says, a lot of the things that the decisions that you make cannot be reversed. So what am I talking about here? For example, committing to a work or job, for example, that means that you cannot, for example, you have to travel a lot. Often doing something like joining a debate club, which seriously lowers your chance of getting a relationship a lot. The point of this is that in the vast majority of cases, people become increasingly desperate towards the kinds of relationships that they have. They're more likely to stay in abusive relationships at that point. The last thing I like to talk about here is about building trust. Because it's true, many individuals who get into these relationships have had bad experiences in the past. But I think a core part of living our lives is that we need to trust other individuals. That's what makes our lives meaningful. You need to trust another person and ensure that putting that trust in another person gives you a general faith in humanity and yourself. Why is this important? The only way that you can heal from an abusive relationship is opening yourself up to a less abusive relationship. One where you can finally trust the fact that there are individuals out there who can care about you. That's when you're more likely to be healed. That's when you're more likely to be less depressed about the state of the world. That's when you're less likely to feel sad about who you are as an individual. Because only when you're able to enter a relationship, a new one, that's when you're more likely to feel loved, that's when you'll be able to feel affirmed. And I think the side proposition, especially many individuals who enter a bad relationship on their side and make this choice, don't get access to any of that. For all of these reasons, we believe that relationships are meaningful. Proposition shuts them out. Very proud to oppose.
Thank you very much. If the third speaker of proposition is ready, we can continue.
Loving another can be done best only when you first learn to love yourself. That is what we've been pushing throughout this debate, and I will push it through my speech as well. What am I going to do in my speech? First, I will point out one big mischaracterization of our side from the opposition. Then I will respond to two of their points, and after that I will bring you three clashes. One on where will people be happier, one on in what world will relationships be better, and then a final clash on societal impacts. Now, moving on to this mischaracterization. We in no way are obliged to support people being celibate for their entire life. The opposition tries to portray us as some kind of people gaming the whole day inside of their mother's basement, never going outside, growing a beard to their necks, to their knees. This is not our case. We say that it is beneficial for younger individuals to not be in a relationship in order to help themselves grow and in order to help society grow. But that's precise. Now moving on to the loose points of rebuttal I have. Now, what we heard from the opposition is that you can get better relationships later in life when at first you had those relationships when you were young. And I mean, sure, this is technically true, but this underestimates the big harms that these relationships bring. Opposition
Point of
thinks,
information.
just a minute. Opposition thinks that relationships always go well, always go right, that breakups are like a cute little thing. Oh yeah, sorry, we're going to break up, bye bye. But that's not it. But before I continue, you did seem to disagree.
We gave you structural reasons in first why people are likely not to find a partner in their later years. For example, they lose their interpersonal skills, they
Alright.
overcommit on work commitment.
I-
So why would people
I
even
understand,
try
I
to
understand. But you underestimate the fact that other relationships still exist. Relationships that are not as heartbreaking to an individual as a romantic relationship. But more on that later in my speech. Now, moving on to one small last point of response. We heard in the last speech, abusive relationships are best solved by going into another relationship, which is pretty wrong. The best way to solve it by therapy. We don't know where this statement came from, but anyway, let's move on to the classes of my speech. Now,
Point of information.
no, please sit down. Class 1. Where are people happier? Now, what we argue is that relationships are often very pressuring to an individual, and therefore having no romantic relationships often is better for an individual's happiness. I have to make clear that we don't say everyone is celibate, but having no relationship is better for one's physical and mental happiness. But what the opposition argues is that relationships give fulfillment to one, relationships make one happier, because of all the positive energy, because of all the benefits that a relationship can bring. But even if those benefits are true, they never talked about the downsides of having a relationship, which are many and which are great. We need to acknowledge.
Point.
No. In a relationship, you are very vulnerable. You're literally being naked towards one another, and you keep a big trust in said other individual to make sure that they don't abuse this power that they have over you, over your vulnerability. But we have to also acknowledge that these relationships often go wrong. Marriages go wrong 50% of the time. They break up 50% of the time. And those are marriages. Those are officially instituted relationships. We're not even talking about teenage relationships which break up almost... Yeah, in a second.
Okay.
Which break up almost every time. Yes, you can ask your POI.
If the downsides of relationships are so great and so many as you claim, will your side break up all relationships?
What? Wait, can you...
If relationships are so harmful, like how marriages have a 50% failure rate, for example, would you then just ban marriages because so many people will be harmed?
No, that is not what we're arguing here. What we're arguing here is that for young people especially, it is better to not have a relationship. But we are in no way obliged to tell you that you cannot have a relationship at all. That is not even in the motion. This House supports motion. So there is no policy burden on us, so we're still in the right. Now, knowing that relationships often fail, and knowing that you are very vulnerable in such relationship, it is very, 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 very hard in a breakup. You see the other person breaking up with you, it is a big break of trust between you and that other person. Many people are heart-struck. No, please sit down. I'm not going to take any further POIs. People are often heart-struck by the fact that there is a breakup, and people often are very mad, very sad, very angry. Even if the benefits of the relationship exist, it's in no way compared to the fact that the person you trusted, that the person you loved, broke up with you, and therefore all of your trust in them, all of your credibility is lost with that breakup. Now moving on to the second class, where will relationships be better? Now, what we argue is that friendships and stuff like that is actually pretty good for an individual, and that they can provide the same satisfaction as a romantic relationship. Well, we get a response, no, please sit down. Friendships are less intimate than romantic relationships. But that's wrong. First of all, you can have many friends, a many great number of friends, and you can keep them all as your friend. This means that even if a relationship, a single relationship might give you big positivity, a net positivity is higher when you have a lot of friends, a bigger friend group. This also means this also makes breakup between friends less harmful because you have all the other friends to rely on. But when you're in a relationship, the number of friends you have is limited because you have to focus on your one partner. And when that breaks up, it is a bigger emotional impact on you because the one factor in the biggest friend, the biggest relationship has fallen. And also, this does not even take into account family relations and co-worker relations, which are also great and also many, which also give you lots of satisfaction in your life. Now, to quickly go over the societal point, we heard a point of theirs saying that, oh yeah, aging is bad, so we gotta get people in relationship to get children. But that undermines the fact that we're talking about young relationships where people don't even get children at all. That is very unlikely. So this point falls out of the debate because young people don't get children many times, a lot of the time, and therefore aging problems still exist on both sides. So to summarize, Dave mischaracterized us, and I will explain to you why relations, even when they're not romantic, are still very satisfactory.
The third speaker of opposition is ready, you can continue.
We saw an interesting shift in the proposition case. In first and second speaker, it was all about societal pressure. It was all about the sexist and societal norms that push people towards relationships. But in third speaker, I think they finally realized that they were debating on the wrong motion. We've been telling them for two speakers that we didn't have to defend all these societal pressures and that this motion was on whether we support an individual's decision to remain single. I just want to point out this shift and that they finally got to the correct case in third speaker, just in case they try to bring up this pressure argument again in reply. I'm going to talk about two things in this speech. First, what's best for the self. Second, what's best for society. And I'm going to spend less time on the second point of contention since that's where we got less engagement from their side. So first, what is best for the self? I'm going to talk about three things under this clash. First, about bad relationships, which is what their previous speaker spent about 6 minutes of his speech on. Second, how this is a misinformed and irreversible choice. And third, how our world is better for individuals. So first, on bad relationships. We don't have to defend people having only one relationship in their entire lives. And we were very clear that if you're in a toxic or abusive relationships, you can leave. We think it's better on our side. We agree with them that heartbreak can sometimes be painful. But I think that it's more painful to be stuck in a toxic relationship forever because you have no choice on proposition. Again, we explained to you in second speaker why bad relationships are more likely on proposition. And we actually gave you 3 reasons that they didn't respond to. First, we told you that when you're older, you have fewer potential partners. Second, when you're older, you have a shorter time frame to find a partner and you like to just stick with the first one you find and have less choice. Third, being able to discern what is a good and a toxic relationship requires dating experience that you only have when you're not single from a young age on our side. 3 reasons we gave you in second speaker as to why bad relationships are more likely on their side. What they say in third speaker is that relationships often fail. There is a reason as to why people should enter a relationship with caution. Why people should get to know the person that they are entering a relationship with, and they should get to know whether this is a toxic relationship. That is not a reason to never get into a relationship as well. We think that it's okay if certain relationships fail for a short period of time. We think it's much more worth it to get a partner that is going to support you for the rest of your life than to be afraid of ever having heartbreak. So we think that in terms of bad relationships, we give you structural analysis why it's less likely on our side of the house, and even if we accept that heartbreak is painful, we think it's far more painful to be stuck in a toxic relationship on their side of the house. So they've taken on the main pillar of the case that they wanted to pivot on in third speaker. Now we told you that this decision was misinformed. We talked to you about the asymmetry of information. We also talked about how your experiences cloud your rational judgment. Like people who have never experienced a relationship or had one bad relationship and then become single forever. So first we told you it's a misinformed choice. Second, we told you this is even more pernicious when it's an often irreversible choice. Their third speaker says that they don't have to defend everyone being celibate forever. And he's right. But if we can prove to you that structurally, being single when you're young means it's more likely that you'll never get into a relationship in the future, that is an outcome they have to accept. And we think we gave you many reasons for this in Matthew, like the hedonistic treadmill, like committing to work so much, like never learning interpersonal skills. We gave you 4 structural reasons in Matthew that they didn't even deign to respond to. This is important for 2 reasons. First, they say that they support relationships that are later in life. They say that these relationships are good. But if we've proven that these relationships are less likely to happen on their side, that's not an outcome they can claim. Second, we told you that the fact that it was a misinformed decision and that it closes off options in the future means that you have less choice and less freedom in the world of the proposition. This is important because even if we disregard all the practical implications, the fact that it is a misinformed and irreversible choice already means that we don't support this decision. The final thing I want to talk about under this clash is benefits to the self. We give you 2 sets of benefits. The first is on happiness of the self. Matthew explains to you that relationships give you intangible things that you cannot get on your own, like commitment, like companionship, like trust. Their third speaker's response doesn't apply here, no thank you, because Gareth and Matthew both explain that friends and family are different. They explain to you that families are different. You don't get to choose your family. Families have certain expectations of you, and therefore tend to be more judgmental. Friends likewise are probably less close. You probably want to be less vulnerable in front of your friends. And you know what? If they say that you have one friend that you're going to confide in and be vulnerable in front of and tell everything to that person, we think that sounds suspiciously like a relationship. So we don't think that friends and family are a viable alternative on their side. Then they say that people get fulfillment in other ways. Well, yes, but this doesn't respond to the point. Even if you get fulfillment elsewhere from your work, that doesn't mean you don't get fulfillment from a relationship. The second response is embedded in their second speaker's argument, which is that independence is important because you can act on your problems alone. This is false. Independence is good, but that doesn't mean you can deal with all your problems alone. That is literally what causes mental health problems like depression, when you go through your problems with no one to confide in and talk to. You know what? I think they agree with this when they say you should talk to friends. Clearly they agree that having someone to confide in is much more important than independence. Sometimes we agree. It's hard to love yourself without the help of others. We think that no man is an island and it's very hard to start loving yourself on their side without anyone to turn to. That was the case of the opposition right from the beginning. Sure.
Would you not agree that it is important to have independence even in a relationship? Because if you're not independent in a relationship, you depend on a cycle of dependency, and then it develops into a toxic relationship on your side of the house.
Thank you. We think that there's a certain difference between confiding in another person and letting them help you and a cycle of dependency. At no point in our case did we ever advocate for living without another person. But they take it to the extreme. Literally, you cannot tell your problems to anyone else because you have to be independent. That's not something we support. We think that there's a huge spectrum of relationships between not tell anyone anything and be completely dependent. We support any relationship along that spectrum. It's not something we have to defend. So back to the happiness of the self. We heard new material in the third proposition that he said that relationships are bad because you're vulnerable in front of another person. We think that's good. We think that just increases trust and commitment. We think that the ability to be vulnerable in front of another person is something that inheres in the human condition. We think that humans are social animals, and this is something that we sorely need. But on top of the happiness of the self, we also talked about economic stability. We explained to you that there were many economic benefits of having a long-term partner, and even disregarding emotional benefits. This is very important from an economic perspective. We said this in first speaker, no response from their side of the house. What have we shown you? Proposition stand for a misinformed and practically irreversible choice. Relationships are important economically and financially to young people. We don't support the decision to remain single. Second point of contention on what's best for society. Matthew explains to you that the decision to remain single harms society because of the dwindling birth rates and aging populations. We finally get a one-line response in their previous speaker. He says young people don't have kids. I don't think this is true, but even if it is true, people tend to be in a relationship for a while before going to have kids. So if you get in a relationship when you are young, that means that the likelihood of you having kids in the future still increases. So I think that this argument still stands. In the light of dwindling populations in especially developed societies and a shrinking tax base, it is absolutely crucial to society that people get into relationships when they were younger. The final thing I want to respond is something they mentioned a first speaker but never came back to. They say that there are economic benefits to society when you focus on your career. And their argument essentially goes like this. Young people working creates economic activity and they could have scientific discoveries, for example. And just think about the implications of that argument. They're essentially fine with sacrificing the happiness of young people just to maximize economic output. We don't stand for that in any meaning. We don't think that's something that they should claim. The case of the opposition has been clear from the top and down the line. This decision is misinformed and closes off options in the future. It harms the well-being of the self and the functioning of society. We think that relationships are meaningful, connections and commitments. We are very proud to stand on opposition.
Thank you very much. If the reply of opposition is ready, we can continue.
At the end of this debate, I honestly think side proposition have made a couple of decent points. They correctly observe that entering relationships is not a good idea all the time. They correctly observe that one must be cautious when entering a relationship. But that's all that they've been able to successfully prove at the end of this debate. They haven't been able to prove to us why we must make the explicit commitment to never enter into a relationship and why they therefore support that decision. That's why they can't win this debate. I'm going to take a look at the two worlds that emerged at the end of this debate, and I want to show to you why the world of the opposition cherished human relationships and made human connections significantly better. But first, let's examine the world of the proposition. The world of proposition was the world of shallow relationships and friendships, because we recognize from the top of this debate that not everyone can have a large group of friends in order to be friends with. We recognize that individuals, by and large, cannot always have that one friend that they can count on. We know that friends and people in a relationship were fundamentally different. We understood that families can't be chosen and that individuals and families often have expectations. This is why it was important for individuals to be able to choose someone that they can uniquely and intimately connect to. The problem is that in the world of the proposition, they close off all future options to access these kinds of relationships. Because the choices that someone will make when they make the explicit commitment to not enter a relationship are incredibly dangerous. When they choose, for example, to throw themselves into work, which means that they are unable, for example, to go out looking for a partner. When they choose to indulge in certain activities where they're not grooming themselves for future relationships. All of these things uniquely close off other options and don't keep them open. Therefore, in the world of proposition, these individuals commit to something that is bad. I think in many ways they accept this. They say that they accept individuals in loving relationships. But how else would you be able to enter into a loving relationship if you didn't keep yourself open to enter one in the first place? They didn't give explicit reason as to why that was the case. It was in the world of proposition where abusive relationships are more likely to occur. And the reason for this is because you don't have the experience of previous relationships to tell you the specific kind of red flags that you're looking for. That's when you get the worst kinds of heartbreak. When you date one person and when they finally realize that it doesn't work out, that's when in the world of the proposition things end up becoming even worse. It is important, therefore, that individuals have future relationships and learn the experiences of the past. Therefore, in the world of the proposition, people force their own self-worth on things that are not worth it. We explain to you why people continuously work for things like improvements in work, even though that will never satisfy them. Why not everyone can be satisfied in terms of the way in which they invent something new, because not everyone can invent something new. And I think in the world of proposition, they close off this option for young people today. So let's transition away from the world of the proposition and talk to you about the world of the opposition. The world of the opposition was significantly clearer. We understood that one, there are numerous societal benefits in entering into a relationship. This looks like things like economic benefits and the production of the nuclear family. But moreover, it's in our world where you get all of the unique relationship benefits that you're looking for. You can heal yourself, because you can only necessarily love yourself if there's someone else there that's able to guide you through that process. It's in the world the opposition when people get more experience in terms of the things that they like and dislike and how exactly they want to be treated. It was in the world the opposition where we explained to you why individuals are able to be supported by one another in a relationship. It was in the world the opposition where we recognized that abusive relationships were significantly less often. It was in the world the opposition where crucially we recognized that individuals can make the active choice to enter into a relationship, to choose what kind of partner that they want to date. And presumably most individuals do in fact want to enter into a loving relationship. What that uniquely means is that side proposition cannot say that only loved relationships are bad. Opposition recognizes that people don't always enter into coercive relationships. That's important. But the only way you can choose to not enter into a coercive relationship is to stand beside opposition. We believe that relationships are meaningful connections and commitments. You shouldn't shut yourselves off to them. We're very proud to propose.